and welcome to Thought Provoking Tech. I'm Zach, and this is the fourth episode of Thought Provoking Tech Weekly. Today, there's some pretty cool articles in different news. The Super Bowl was last weekend, and there was a pretty awesome drone show. It wasn't the best demonstration that I think that Intel has given of the drone technology, but it was certainly pretty cool. So let's go ahead and jump straight to the news. All right, so the very first article is on how your Facebook password may soon be required to immigrate or to get a visa into the U.S. Specifically, it's only about was mentioned in reference to the 7 countries that President Trump recently banned from entry. That's Iraq, Iran, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Sudan, and Libya. However, if this is put in effect, it might be something that the reaches of it actually expand beyond that. However, there's a pretty big flaw in the requiring your Facebook profile. For one, what's simply to stop people from creating a second profile that is their public one, where it is completely fake and none of their true feelings or intentions or anything like that are displayed publicly, and they have one that's marked private. That has a weird profile picture that can't really be associated with them. I know, like with the government has the ability to track based on IP and so on and so forth. So they could probably link those together. But just to get to immigrate, how are they going to, necessarily prove that? And are they going to run these in-depth checks on everybody that is wanting a visa or anything along those lines just to enter into the U.S.? And that'd be something that, is totally questionable. And then beyond that, I doubt people are really using Facebook to, for, I know there's some people, but, there's so many other services out there that have encrypted communications that, Facebook probably isn't even the best one to target if you wanted to implement a system like this. So just in general, the entire ideal doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So just something weird that that is in talks right now. The specific quote I wanted to talk about was John Kelly, which is the Homeland Security Secretary, said, "We want to get their on their social media with passwords. What do you do? What do you say? If they don't want to cooperate, then they don't come in." So just something I wanted to throw out there. It's a weird move. In the past, though, it isn't entirely new. And as this article mentions, or may I read it somewhere else, but in the Obama administration, they talked about possibly adding a optional field to list your your social media profiles and your name on those profiles, your handle, and so on and so forth, if you don't have the real name on that specific social media platform. So it's not something that's completely new, but I just don't really understand what they're trying to gain here, because people can set up fake accounts, and there's numerous methods to bypass and get around this legislation if it is put into play. So just something don't really understand, and figure I want to talk about it and share a couple thoughts on it. Then very next article is another thing that's going on right now. This one's in the House of Representatives, and they could possibly pass a bill that would require warrant access to get to your email. So this is actually something that's good. It's something I'm surprised that we don't have, but as the VentureBeat article mentions, our legislation when it comes into technology is so outdated that it's crazy, and this is just something that's going to try to move forward with and kind of essentially patch a hole in what our laws that we already have. Right now, it is just a bill, and it passed by voice vote, and it is expected to meet opposition in the Senate. So whether it actually becomes a law or not is there's a lot of question into that. But I think it's definitely a good move to have warrant required to have access to your emails. So just another quick article on what's going on in the world of law and technology. So now another little article on a website that wasn't loading correctly. On The Verge is the ZTE's Axon 7 is joining the Pixel and the Moto Z as phones with Daydream compatibility. There isn't a lot to say about this article other than the fact that there is another phone that is now Daydream compatible. It's great to see expanded support for the Google Daydream platform. Hopefully now that some phones are starting to roll out that have that support, we start to see more support from the developers and people actually starting to make apps for the Google Daydream specifically, because it does have that little handy controller. We have a Google Daydream at work that I was testing with. I might borrow that and do a quick review on it. There are some issues primarily with the headset itself. I haven't done a lot of testing with the controller and the full ecosystem. I do think there's a lot of potential with having the controller, but the headset itself, there's a couple of things that I don't like about it, as opposed to even some cheaper options out there. So I might do a quick review on that in the future, but it is great to see some expanded support for the Google Daydream. And as it grows, Google has come a long way from the very basic Google Cardboard that they announced or pushed out a long time ago and where they are now. So it's going to be cool to see where the mobile VR market heads to from here. And one more VR topic. Oculus Rift was recently released an update. Nate Mitchell from Oculus tweeted a big focus this month on making sure 3+ sensor setups are working optimally. So essentially, it's going to let the setups where you have 3 cameras. Previously, there was only 1 camera. Then when Touch came out, it was bundled with another camera. It was pretty much required to have 2 cameras to use the touch features of the Oculus Rift. Now they did allow you to buy a 3rd camera that is optional, and up to 4 cameras, although a lot of the recommendations that I see are for 3 cameras for the best user experience. But it looks like they're really focusing on improving the experience with people that are wanting to add that 3rd or possibly 4th camera, and that'll only improve tracking. And it's cool that now that we have this first generation of hardware, we're starting to see some software improvements come out, and those will continue to develop as they fine-tune the software for the current generation hardware. Now we'll probably see a Generation 2 probably at the end of this year, maybe next year. Not really too solid on when that'll be, but I definitely foresee a Generation 2 coming in roughly a year, 18 months, so 12 to 18 months. So it's awesome to see that they're continuing to develop the software, though, so that people that do have the current generation aren't left behind when the newer versions and new hardware iterations come out. From what I hear, the current hardware is pretty solid, but there are some different changes. And kind of from everything that I've listened to VR, and I follow it quite heavily, it seems like if you kind of add a lot of the features from, take a couple features from Oculus, a couple features from PlayStation VR, a couple features from the Vive, and add them all together, you'll have a pretty very solid product. Instead of, a great product, you'll go from a good product to a great product. So it's going to be interesting to see what Generation 2 brings, but it's awesome to see that they are continuing to develop with the current generation of hardware, as that'll only mean a more solid platform for Generation 2. Moving on to cloud computing, Microsoft had just announced a pretty big price cut, up to 51% in certain markets and in certain use cases. So the biggest cut was a 51% cut in a certain tier of computing hardware, which is the A1 Basic. If you're not into the cloud computing thing, just know that that's about one of the lower range cloud computing servers that you can buy from the Azure platform. In addition, they also cut pricing in storage, where you're kind of your normal storage you're accessing all the time, what they call the hot blocks, is cut 20-60%, and the cool blocks were cut up to 38%. So we're seeing the price war continue, but the thing that I really wanted to take away from this article was the leadership and the market share of the cloud providers. AWS is still the king. However, they didn't really change between Q4 of 2015 and Q4 of 2016. They have roughly 40% market share in both of those times. There was a little bit of change, but not much. However, Microsoft, Google, and IBM combined grew 5% in that same period. So AWS did not increase or decrease, which is good that they didn't decrease, but their market share didn't increase anymore. However, when you own 40% of the market, there's certainly more to grow, but there's a lot of competition in that market. But we're seeing the three next biggest. They have now essentially reached a point where they have their combined market share has passed the 50% mark of what AWS has. So now those Microsoft, IBM, and Google together now have roughly half of what AWS has. Now it's actually more than half of what AWS has, but there's still a lot of growth that even when adding those three, the next three biggest cloud providers together have just to beat or even to meet Amazon's AWS. So AWS still has a massive lead. It'll be interesting to see where things go from there. We're seeing the other providers outside of those on a downward trend. So we're seeing a lot of probably startups and guys along those lines not succeeding where they really want to. And you're gonna have essentially the four big guys, and Oracle might end up popping up in there. That's another one that's somewhat big, but AWS, Microsoft, Google, and IBM are going to be huge cloud providers, and they still have the last three still have a lot of room to go before they're even on par added together with what Amazon's AWS has. They'd have a pretty big head start, and they were kind of the big starters in this market with their AWS. So that accounts for a lot of that. And we are starting to see that the other guys are slowly catching up. So it'll be interesting to see where cloud computing goes from here as prices continue to go down. It'll make cloud computing services more and more viable. Services like Liquid Sky's cloud gaming platform, that's completely custom service outside of like Amazon's EC2, which is their cloud computing platform. For gaming purposes, Liquid Sky has a lot of focus on that, and when you have real-time interactions. But for other applications that don't require that super low latency, your other options such as Microsoft, Google, or Amazon, or IBM, having a cloud computer that you can access from anywhere is becoming more and more of a reality. I'm really familiar with Amazon services. I've used their Amazon Web Services the most. I have used Microsoft's a little bit. But for example, Amazon has their cloud works stations, which is essentially just like you'd be logging into your local computer, but it's actually hosted on Amazon servers. The biggest thing about that when I tried that last was it was kind of outdated. I believe it was like running on essentially Windows 7, if I remember correctly. So there are some things that they need to improve upon, but we're getting to the state where people won't really have physical machines that they're running on. Everything will be done in the cloud. We're getting pretty close to that point in time. I had a plan to do like a big centralized computer in my home and have everybody connect to that. But as internet speeds increase and cloud computing going down in price, it seems that might not be really required as much as it is as it was when I originally had the idea a year or so ago. So definitely as businesses and stuff advance and want to deploy and expand, just ramping up another cloud computer is very simple. And I see that being a continuing trend. We're already kind of seeing Microsoft do some work with having their phone plug into a dock and then become your computer. And if you combine that with a cloud computer that can run your higher end software, for example, if you do engineering software or design software or like video editing with Adobe's Premiere or After Effects, if you ran all that stuff that's a little bit more compute intensive in the cloud and had your local machine essentially being your link between you and the cloud, then we're definitely getting to that point. It's going to be really interesting to see where they go, and if Amazon starts to try to push their workspaces. I haven't heard if like the other guys have something that's kind of like the workspaces that just makes it very simple to have a cloud computer. but I definitely foresee that becoming bigger and bigger in the near future. Probably in a year from now, that'll be something that'll be even more mainstream. Moving on from cloud computing to just local computing, I have an article on Logitech's new webcam. So Logitech last year released a pretty cool webcam that had features to remove the background, and this year it looks like they're going to follow it up and one-up it with a pretty solid spec sheet. So the Logitech Brio is a 4K webcam with HDR support. So we're seeing a lot of improvements in Logitech's webcams. There's going to be different use cases for this, whether it's a high-resolution video conference and continuing to improve the resolution that those webcams can use, especially if you have a wide view angle and you have a lot of people. Having that higher resolution will just let everything become more clear. That also has a double-edged sword of requiring more bandwidth. So if the link between the two people isn't awesome, then you won't really be able to take advantage of the higher resolution. Beyond that, this webcam, the Brio, is also compatible with Windows Hello. So with Windows Hello, you can actually just look at your Windows desktop and unlock it via Windows Hello. You have to smile or something along those lines, but this will possibly allow more people to get access to Windows Hello. It is quite expensive at $200, so don't expect it to be super widespread. But for people that do live streaming or any type of video conferencing, it could definitely be a very viable option, especially on the higher end of that. In addition, if you drop the resolution from 4K down to 720p, you can actually record in 90 FPS. So if you want something that's somewhat fast frame rate and quality of the picture isn't as important as your frame rate, then it is another option for that too. All right, so moving on to drone talk. So I'll be playing a video in the background of the Super Bowl halftime show. You can see the drone show going on in the background, and it was a pretty cool demonstration. I have seen better demonstrations from Intel in the past, and as the demonstration loads because my internet's horrible. But it wasn't, the best demonstration that I have seen, as I'm trying to say. It was pretty cool, and there are some interesting points that I wanted to draw out that I gained from a Wired article on this, which is linked in the description too. So these drones were controlled from a single PC. Prior to the show starting, each drone was scroll back a little. Each drone was communicated to and the signal strength as well as the battery levels were checked, and then roles were assigned to the different drones. So with the single PC, they're kind of not really aware of each other, but they're all controlled from the single PC, which kind of ran through a startup procedure to analyze the status of all the status of all the drones. So if a drone would lose connectivity in the middle of the show, a reserve drone would take its place in a matter of seconds. So Intel has a pretty solid background here that they're starting to form with this software. They've had several good demonstrations that they've done, and it's just really interesting to see where we're going from here and how drones are being used in everyday life. Intel began the engineering for the show back in December, but they did encounter some issues, primarily with the FAA and the federal government. The biggest thing was that the show actually had to be recorded a week earlier due to the regulations that wouldn't let them fly the drones live, simply because they were flying over a huge crowd, and the stadium itself was actually a no-fly zone for drones, but they did bypass those regulations to at least get the drones in there to record the video. But I actually didn't catch that at all, that this was actually pre-recorded in the background. I'm not aware if the people in the stadium had any were able to see the show. I don't know if it was projected onto this roof. I don't know what the capabilities of the stadium itself are. but it was an interesting show, and I just wanted to talk about it a little bit and kind of the technology that Intel is using in this behind the scenes. And the last topic for today is moving on to robotics. Zoom Pizza is a company that is going to cook your pizza while it drives to you. So they have an algorithm that they use to determine what people will order from a curated menu. It's not something that you can completely customize like you can with most pizza places where you can have all the different toppings. You choose your toppings that you want and you order your pizza. But it does have a curated menu that they use an algorithm to kind of guess what people will be ordering that day. People make the pizzas with some help from a robotic arm. There are certain things it does. Like, for example, taking the pizzas in and out of the oven. And the pizzas are prepped and done with a pre-cook and then loaded onto a truck. As pizza orders are placed by humans, the drivers of the trucks are given GPS coordinates. They drive to those coordinates to deliver the pizza pretty much like a normal delivery system. However, the pizzas in the back, the ones that are matched the order, when they're about 4 minutes out, will automatically start cooking again and do that final cook, so that when the driver reaches the destination, the pizzas are done, they're freshly cooked, they're hot, so you're never going to have cold pizza again. This ensures that the delivery is going to be fast. For one, the driver doesn't have to wait for the pizza to be made before he can start driving. He's already going to be in his truck and driving to the delivery destination. And it's going to also ensure an always warm pizza, because the pizza is literally cooked and finished right as the driver reaches your delivery point. So it's just cool to see how robotics are starting to be used, automation is starting to be used more and more into our everyday lives. So they have a little bit of use for a robotic arm inside of the kitchen itself. And then they have automation that determines, based on GPS coordinates, when to do that final cook of the pizza and have it ready for when the driver actually reaches the destination. So definitely pretty cool in that regards. So that's pretty much the end of the topics for this week. I hope you found some of this information informative as well as entertaining. Beyond that, there are a couple things I want to talk about in regards to thought-provoking tech. I will have an update next week on my drone project. You can see here. Have made some progress on it. Just a short little video on the progress I've made. I'm going to be working on version 2 before too long and getting that ironed out. And beyond that, make sure you subscribe, guys. Thanks for watching. I appreciate all the feedback you have. Leave any comments or questions that you have in the description below, or email me in the podcast email if you're listening on one of your podcast servers, and that will be in the description of this episode. So thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you like if you're watching this on YouTube, and subscribe on the platform of your choice. Once again, thanks for watching or listening, and until next time, Zach out.